Hello and welcome. I'm Julie Fogel, the Director of Marketing at CurryWorks, and I'll be your host for today's webinar, Appeals and Grievances, Standardizing Intake for Data Accuracy and Informed Decision Making. Thanks for your time today to join us to talk about this essential first step in the A&G process. Our goal today is to not only discuss the challenges that many payers face when they're creating or classifying or assigning cases, but what to look for when solving for those challenges with technology. And before I introduce today's presenters, I do have a few housekeeping items. We have muted the attendees' microphones, but we definitely want to make sure you're able to engage with us. So please utilize that chat box feature and drop questions on the topic or share a struggle or two about your experiences. We'll be monitoring these throughout today's session. And we are also recording today's webinar, and we'll be sharing a link with you to the session for you to either revisit or share with colleagues. Without further ado, let me introduce you to today's speakers who will walk us through the intake process and how to ensure more informed decisions are made downstream in that A&G process. Katie Panzica is an account executive here at CurryWorks, and she brings 18 years of experience with OnBase, the industry-leading enterprise content services platform by Highland Software that provides the foundation for CurryWorks solutions. She's been with the CurryWorks team for 11 years, the past 8 of which have focused on healthcare payer solutions. Dan Smith also joins us today. For the past 6 years, Dan's served as CurryWorks senior sales engineers, where he's putting to use more than his 17 years of experience implementing OnBase and CurryWorks solutions in the payer and provider space. Let's get started. Katie.
Thank you, Julie, and thank you all for joining us. As Julie said, we're here to talk about the intake process of your appeals and grievances solutions. And we know that appeals and grievances can be very complex and time consuming. And there's many steps within this process. It all starts with intake, but then there's those steps of investigation, collaborating with members of your team, back and forth communication. All of this is enabling you to make a decision and then report the data that you've collected throughout that process to third parties to ensure that you are in compliance. So that is that overall end-to-end solution with appeals and grievances. But today we are here to talk about intake, because this is where it truly starts. It's really the key to having a case flow through your process in a timely manner. Because if intake is not executed correctly, you'll see many issues downstream. And most of the time when you catch those issues down that process, it's usually too late. So Dan and I are here to share the value of how an automated solution can really help solve many of your intake battles. So I want to first talk about intake methods. We know that every organization is different, which means that you have multiple methods for intake. Maybe a primary method you receive a request is through an online portal. Or maybe it's your member services team. They receive many grievances by phone. Other methods may be an email that comes into a dedicated inbox, or even regular old-fashioned mail. You have a mailroom and you receive a large quantity of those requests that you need to then scan into your system. And we're here to tell you that no matter how you receive your appeal, your grievance, your inquiry, our automated solution can ingest and process it in the same manner. And this is very beneficial to any organization because it'll process those different formats that your requests come in the same manner. And having an automated process means that anyone in your organization can submit an appeal or grievance or inquiry in the same fashion. So it's really making sure that that process starting at intake is executed in the same way. So why are we here? Let's ask ourselves a few questions. Do you struggle with bad data? And I think the answer for everyone is we all do. Whenever we're dealing with a manual process, human error is inevitable. There's really no getting around that. We all make mistakes. How are you classifying cases today? Do you have a way that you can ensure cases are not misclassified? And if they are, how do you know? Is it too late once you find out if that case is misclassified? And then how time consuming is it to create a case? We know as soon as a case comes in, you're on the clock, right? We know that there's time frames around every different type of case. So is your intake process taking you minutes? Is it taking you hours? Is it even taking a half a day to process that case? And then how are you assigning cases? Do you have a system that in place that ensures the workload of all your users is balanced? And then how many systems do you have to access to create a case, to find that data? Because we all know that data is truly the driver on how to move a case forward, but rarely does all of the data that we need come in on that request. And if you do have members that are putting all the information on that request, you have some fantastic members, because a lot of times we hear that, very rarely is all the information there. So if you can relate to these questions, or maybe you can't even answer some of these questions, we're glad that you're here. And we want to discuss these challenges and how they impact your intake and case creation process. But we're also going to let you know how we can help improve this first step. So see, these are some of the challenges we see most customers have. We're dealing with multiple systems to gather the data that we need to drive that case. A lot of times by looking in these multiple systems, copying and pasting, we're creating a lot of bad data. Misclassifying cases is really a direct effect of some of that bad data. And then customers are they're struggling to assign cases to the correct user. And what do all these things impact? Time. It's not only the time of your users, but it's the time of the case. And we know that that is critical when we're talking about processing appeals and grievances. So let's start with multiple systems. So like I said previously, most of the time, the data that we need is not needed to create a case, does not come on the request. So a lot of times your users are having to look it up, and they might not even go to the right system first to find that data. So once you do find the data, and that could have been already going through 1 or 2, 3, 4 systems, you're having to copy and paste a lot of that data, or you're typing it in. And this just puts you at risk of introducing bad data. But not only is it the bad data, again, it's the unnecessary time, which we know is precious to everyone. So how can we avoid this issue? Dan's going to talk a little bit about how an automated solution can help your users really crack down on having to go into multiple solutions so that you can just stay in one solution to bring back the data that really is your source of truth. Dan?
Thank you, Katie. What you're seeing on the screen is our case creation form alongside the actual correspondence we received for that request. Within our case creation form, your intake or analyst can easily click the member, the provider, or the claim and auth areas and do a quick search into your repository for those different data elements. So within this case, we're going to click in the member ID area, and next screen, that will bring up a search screen where we can, in this case, you see only 2 elements, but we can add any data element from your member system to do a search on that. So if you wanted to add social security number, address, phone number, whatever search method you use, we can easily type in that information, do a search, and then on the next screen, we will have the member data. So we'll get directly to that. We're not searching through Excel. We're not searching through multiple systems. Programmatically behind the scenes, we'll do those connections to our case creation form and be able to bring that corrected data directly back to this case creation form.
Yeah, so integrating with your member, provider, claim, and auth data, it really ensures that we are automatically pulling in the correct data and eliminating that human error, such as the fat fingering or having individuals copying and pasting, right? So it's saving time, but then it's going on to my next slide. It's helping us to reduce the issues of bad data. And you're going to hear a lot about bad data throughout this webinar because at any time bad data can really creep in, especially when we're talking about a manual process. So, and it's not just the incorrect typing that causes bad data. You know, we've talked about users having to copy and paste or type in some of that data, but it could be poor training, which is the cause. So your users may not know certain terminology. They may skip fields that are required. They may guess or assume a data element that is not correct or not know where to look up the information. And this doesn't mean that they're not doing a good job. They just might not have that information that they need or even know that it's required information for the case to even proceed. And once you have bad data, you know, many times you won't know that the data is even bad until it's late. It's too late. And once bad data is introduced, it just creates major impacts on how a case is processed. And just for example, if you for some reason entered bad member info, and if you have the wrong member info, you may have the wrong plan information. And they may process it incorrectly based off of the incorrect plans, rules, and SLAs. So not only is this case just being processed incorrectly, but now you're not serving your members in their best interest. And this is just going to cause them to have an unsatisfactory experience, you know, which is really what, as health payers, you want to make sure that your members truly are satisfied with how they're doing business with you. So how can we reduce the risk of bad data? Dan's going to show you how really the data elements are going to drive the process and how our smart dynamic form really ensures that the user really is trained well and knows what elements they're selecting.
Yeah, with this example, again, in the case creation form here, no matter the amount of training that intake user has, the form really drives the process of filling it out. So you'll see that the majority of the fields on here are data select fields. We limit text entry fields as much as possible to prevent that bad data. So we do have these fillable drop downs that you could select. As we select the submitter in this case, next screen, the form will dynamically open up the data fields that they need to fill out. As you can see, they're in red because they're required. And then as they fill out those fields, the form will dynamically, again, add different areas as needed per the case type or the plan type that they're submitting.
Yeah, so leveraging those drop downs, it's really reducing the errors and not having to type in fields and having that smart dynamic form is only going to show those fields related to that previous field that was selected, right, Dan? So like we were showing how this is for a representative, but if a representative wasn't selected, we wouldn't be seeing those fields.
Correct, yeah, if it was the member, in this case as the submitter, we already had the member information, so we're not going to see any additional fields to fill out. But if it was a PAR physician, those data fields would fill out.
Right. And Dan, you brought up another key thing, because I talked about it just on the previous slide, just about required fields. You know, in a manual process, it might not be defined of what's required, or you know, just a user may have to skip that. But you know, with an automated solution, you could visually see here that those fields that look like kind of a pinkish red color, I mean, those are required, and you can't go on to the next step, right? Unless those fields actually have a value.
Exactly. Or even moving further onto that, not only required, but if the plan type doesn't support like standard or priority cases over standard and you select priority, we have automation built into the form that will stop the process and give a little screen that tells the user what the issue was.
Right. So again, these are just with an automated solution. We're really trying to make sure that it is really error-proof, and that we are collecting all that data up front so that we know those cases are going to be processed correctly. So the next challenge is misclassifying cases. And this is another way that bad data really creeps in and can impact your appeals and grievances process. And once a case gets misclassified, there is no easy way in a manual process to really restart it, right? I mean, if you're in intake and you classify it as a grievance versus appeal, and you send it on its way, you know, unless someone can jump in and see and make those corrected changes, it doesn't make for a very flexible solution. And once a case is processed incorrectly, you're going to find yourselves, you know, out of compliance, right? Like, these are a lot of those risks we face in a manual process of just out of compliance, monetary penalties towards your organization. And then what I touched base before, you know, at the end of the day, it's probably poor member and provider satisfaction. So an automated solution is going to really help alleviate a lot of those pains by enabling your users to select the right case type. And Dan's going to kind of talk about how we do that and how we know for sure that this is the correct case, you know, for this request.
Yeah, so as you can see in the screenshot, we already have that member identified. Immediately we see all the member case history brought right into this case form, so we could find any duplicates. We do have a system level research that looks for duplicates as well, but the user can see those if there's any duplicates and see existing cases for this member right there. But in the top right is where we select the specific plan, where we can identify the plan and priority and case type that we should be filling out. So based on your member information, we know the plan they're associated with. So we only bring back the correct plan. You're not searching through all the plans you have in your solution. We bring back that list of different case types within the plan they're a member of. And then within each of these columns, we have Excel-like tools where you can sort and filter down to get exactly the data you're looking for. So we know that this is an appeal, and then we just have the plan and case type, whether it's expedited or a standard. So really, there's no guessing. You have the data right in front of you. Misclassification should not be an issue with this tool.
That's great, and it's great to hear. And the next piece that we often hear from customers is case assignment. It's another big challenge that I think a lot of organizations face. It may not be as difficult in a smaller organization, a smaller A&G team. We've worked with clients with teams of 2. We've worked with clients with teams of 102. And I think it's when you see larger departments, multiple analysts, it's when this gets a little tricky, and that's where, again, we can start to see hiccups in the process. And the biggest issue I think we see with case assignment is that they just aren't assigned properly. And then they're not tracked in any way. So when they're not assigned properly and they're not tracked a specific way, you can't really ensure that the case is getting processed in a timely fashion. One of the main roadblocks to this is there's no insight. You know, in a manual process, it isn't easy to see what a user's workload is. Sally may be working on 50 cases today, and then Frank may only be working on two. So you might say, oh, well, this next workload, you know, these next 10 cases, let's just assign to Frank. But at the same time, maybe Frank has those 2 cases are approaching deadlines and he can't really start additional cases. He needs to be focused on those 2. So it would be better to assign all the new cases coming in to another worker. Or maybe you have certain cases, maybe you're set up in a way where specific cases go to assigned analysts, you know, based off of a plan, based off of a case type. And in a manual process, if we're working through a spreadsheet or it's just you're assigning, you know, based off of who's in the office that day, it's not the most effective way, and it's not a great way to hold users accountable, you know, for their workload, because again, you're not seeing the big picture, you're not seeing the whole picture. So, you know, Dan, how does a solution like CureWorks solution alleviate some of those pains with case assignment?
Yeah, definitely. So during initial discovery of the implementation, the case creation form will be thoroughly reviewed. And one of those fields is analyst assignment. We have multiple values in there, manual or automated case assignment. If we're choosing manual, then you can manually assign during case creation the analyst you want to go to. If automated is the value that you select, then there's some configuration and discovery we need to do behind the scenes on how you want that automated. The solution that Julie alluded to, the on-base solution, that is the driver behind the scenes of this solution, really has multiple load balancing options. So we could load balance on user, based on plan. So if we have specific users that only work certain plans or certain case types, or Katie, you and I were on a call recently where they want to do load balance on a decision agreement. So any value really within the solution that we save, we can distribute work based on that value. So it's really unlimited. So we will need to do some discovery and figure out how you route that to your analyst, but having this case creation form set to automated and sent into a load balance queue is the way to go.
And even with an automated tool like this, right, we can even tie in some of the users' calendars, right, for vacation time and things like that, so that cases aren't being routed to people who are going to be out for a week, right?
Exactly. And even if they do get routed to those users that are on vacation or called in sick, once the case is created in the solution, there's a button to reassign case. So that can be, 200 cases all at once. You just select them all, click reassign, and you could reassign to a user, or you could do it on a one-off basis and just reassign individual cases.
And one other item I just remembered is that, this is another great way when you have a solution like this in place to prevent issues where analysts might be, let's say, cherry picking, right? They're picking the cases that they want to work. Maybe they find them a little easier, or, whatever the reason why one person would pick one over the other, it can kind of reduce that by assigning it to certain people, based off of certain rules that we've implemented into the solution.
Exactly.
So then, the last challenge I really want to touch on, and it's really that it's the time, right? And it's all of these challenges we've already talked about. It really, they all directly impact time. So time is a challenge in itself, but a lot of times there's just other factors that it's affecting that, whether that it's searching for the right data, or because bad data has been created from what we said before, copying and pasting or fat finger typing, all these different problems that we're facing with a manual intake process. It's really going to directly impact the time it takes to process a case. And what is the biggest risk for time that's wasted, right? It's being out of compliance. These cases have due dates for a specific reason. And if we wasted too much time up front, it is going to impact that downstream process. And then that's when we're starting to feel some of those penalties that might hit us. It could affect star ratings, and unhappy members. And we want to keep our members happy, right? We want to be able to know where that case is within the process. And that's really when we talk about that end-to-end solution, of seeing how the case is being processed. And a lot of this can be avoided when you do manage your appeals and grievances solution in a tool like CureWorks A&G. So I'm gonna let Dan touch base on what we're seeing here, but this is the overall big picture. We've been talking about intake, but as we've hit on many times, is intake is a direct impact on how a case is going to be processed downstream. But when you have an automated tool, it's really giving you that insight, that real-time insight that you need, into your process so that you can reduce a lot of those bottlenecks. You can find some of that bad data quickly. You know that a case needs to be assigned to a different user. So Dan, I'm going to let you talk about some of these reports and how these are, how it impacts the solution, but kind of going back to what we're seeing here, and as it relates to intake with user assignment and case type, things like that.
Yeah, definitely. So the CareWorks A&G solution comes with a handful of default reports out of the box. You can build as many reports using the point and click configurable report tool that is part of the OnBase solution. One of the big differentiators with our reporting tool versus like a Tableau or an external reporting tool is that it's fully interactive with the CareWorks A&G solution. So not only are the graphs dynamic, so you could filter and drill down when you're clicking on a graph, but through the grid at the bottom, you can get that real-time insight into the case. So not only at the data level here looking at the report, but you could actually go into the case directly from this report and really review your team's notes and see why it's hung up, why it missed compliance, what the timing issue is. And then next, this is an overall case view based on the case type. Again, drilling down to the case type, priority, the plan type, really diving in and using the data that we're collecting in the intake process and the rest of the process to really gain insight into our solution. So, reduce those bottlenecks, but also maybe, we're seeing an uptick in certain case types. So we want to review our plan information to make sure we're providing the correct data within a plan, and really diving into those reports and using the data that we have at hand.
And yeah, that's a very good point that you mentioned, though, is that these data elements are all those data points that we collected at intake. That is what's really giving us the ability to display this type of information. And some of this information we can leverage on intake when you're talking about analysts and assignment, but this is, again, that big picture of really seeing that process end to end.
Yep.
So we focused on intake today, but it really is about automating the entire A&G process. A successful A&G solution, it does start with intake, but it continues throughout the process. And our A&G solution, it does provide you with a true end-to-end case management solution. But I truly believe that automating your intake is the key to reducing the hurdles you face downstream. And I think it's the one aspect of this process that we really do need to focus on, because it is the driver of some of those problems that we do face down the line. So, just to talk about some of those benefits of automating your intake and why we should automate it is, I think the biggest piece is time. We really need to stop wasting it with our manual process. There's tools out there that really helps us be more efficient and effective workers. The biggest thing when we automate a tool or when we automate a process is now we have the tools to integrate. So we're able to reduce the number of systems that your users need to find their data. And we know that data that we are collecting is from your source of truth. And a solution like this will help, will allow like a dynamic form to guide your users. It kind of takes the guesswork out of the process. Like Dan showed you, we have the drop down. So based off of you selecting a specific and more restricted set of fields versus free typing it in, whatever that selection would be is going to dictate what we see further down on that form to make sure that case type is really moving in the correct way.
And another point, Katie, just to add, the CareWorks solution is built on top of OnBase, which is that enterprise class document management and case management solution. If your intake forms are coming in machine print, we do have numerous advanced capture OCR solutions where we can automate that process as well. So use the OCR to capture those data elements so a user doesn't have to type them at all. Handwriting's still a little difficult despite maybe any marketing you might see, but machine print and standardized forms are always the easiest to be able to reduce any of those different areas that we looked at.
It's an excellent point. It is. So, giving better insight, I think, to your process and being able to report on your overall solution, really is the key to ensure that you are hitting, all those milestones that you need to hit, ensuring that you are staying compliant and keeping your members happy. And it truly is about getting it right from the start. I'm a firm believer of that. And, intake is really where it's at. So, I think that it is beneficial to start looking and asking your questions, those kind of questions we hit on at the beginning of why we're here. And if you struggle with any of those problems, and I'm sure there's more problems that you guys may face with intake. But if you're asking yourself those questions and you have answers to intake, automating intake is really the way to go. I am going to open up for questions, but we did talk about it, that we have an overall end-to-end solution. Dan and I, we focused on intake, but we do have, this is a series of webinars that CareWorks is going to be hosting, and we are going to touch base on a lot of different other aspects of our solution. I think one of the next webinars is going to be on document generation. So automatically creating your acknowledge letters, your decision letters, the system knowing when an AOR is required and automatically generating that. So there's a lot of fantastic aspects to automating your solution. Intake is the beginning, but there's a lot more in the middle. So we hope that you're able to join for some of those webinars as well. But right now, I'd love to open it up to any questions that any of you guys may have.
I'm muted. That's lovely. It's only been 24 months of this and I still can't find the mute button. You did touch on one, Dan. We did see one come in about OCR, that optical character recognition. And the answer to that obviously is yes, that is possible. And handwriting, if I'm not mistaken, just routes as an exception. They can ingest those. See, this is the marketing side of me. You can ingest those, but they will route for exceptions if there are questions. It's not as straight through as some of the machine printing for sure. There was another one about fields. Can we add fields to this intake form?
Definitely. Yeah, the answer is yes. It's a point and click configurable solution, so no programmers needed. If you wanted to open it up to an analyst, a business analyst to add fields, they definitely can. Yes, and not only add fields, but with our base solution, if any of the data sets within the drop downs don't meet the language that you use currently, you can change the words that are in those data sets to match your organization's language.
That's a great segue. There was another one that was, what if we already have an intake process that we like? Is this going to make us, change to something different? How does that work?
No, definitely. All we want is the data to create the case. So if you have an existing intake process, if it's within, a document management tool like OnBase already, we could just push that data over to create the cases, or we have numerous ingestion methods. If it's a CSV, a flat file, a direct database query to create cases within our solution, we could do that from your intake process.
And I know that we're coming up on time, but there's one last one that I think we have time for. What if we have 2 or more places to look up member information?
Yeah, that's definitely programmatically possible. The solution, when we build it out, we typically go with a web service call to your member system, whatever it may be, whether that's a direct database query. We could just add that into the lookup, have multiple databases queried within there, or if need be, the non-ideal method would be a flat file ingestion of your member data elements into our solution.
Great. Well, that brings us to the end of today's session. I'd like to thank, oh wait, there might be another one. There is. Can this tool communicate with a current platform, or is it only compatible with certain platforms? I'm not sure if that's referencing OnBase as a platform or different software solutions that might be in place. Tell me a little bit about the integration. How about that?
Yeah, so OnBase as a platform that CarrierWorks A&G is built on top of has numerous tools, APIs, standard out-of-the-box ingestion methods. So we can really, even screen level integrations through keyboard and mouse controls. There are numerous tools that we can use to integrate with other document management solutions, with your member solutions, with maybe you have a solution within your Medicare A&G, but you don't have one within commercial. We can integrate with that other A&G solution and share data amongst those to provide the document management, case management solutions that CarrierWorks A&G provides.
Fantastic. Well, I do know we're getting up on time here. That was the last question we have time for, but definitely the contact information for both Katie and Dan are on the screen. I'd like to thank both Katie Panzica and Dan Smith for sharing their insight with us today. And again, please do watch your email. Later this week, we'll be sharing a link to today's recording, as well as more information about CarrierWorks A&G solutions and those future webinars we mentioned on additional A&G topics. On behalf of CarrierWorks, I thank each of you for your time today. Enjoy the rest of the day.
Thank you.
Thank you.